Welcome back to Following Noah on a Stormlight podcast. This week's episode 175, and we're going through chapters 17 through 24 of The Hero of Ages. Paul, how are you?
Magnificent. Excited. All of the above.
Eliot?
175. That feels like a milestone. We're on our way to 200. That feels like a ridiculously high number. This has been good times.
Indeed. We'll be hitting episode 200 somewhere in the middle of Mistborn Era 2. I don't know exactly where it'll fall, but it'll be right about Mistborn Era. Yeah, like maybe towards the second half of Mistborn Era 2. Paul, do we have another patron this week?
Absolutely, we do, Trevor. I'm excited. Once again, we have another surgeon and someone who's just been super kind to us, and we're always thankful for support. And so I want to give a big shout out this week to drumroll, Chris. Chris here. I don't have. He's the new kid on the block, if you will. You know, our newest surgeon. But we're super grateful to have him here. And thankful for his support. Chris, if you're listening, we really appreciate the kind message that you wrote to us. As well, and just your encouragement. It goes a long way, and it really means a lot. And like I've said before, it's just super fun to just get the opportunity to talk and hear from other Cosmere fans and other fantasy fans. You know, it's just a ton of fun, and super exciting. So we really appreciate your support and everything. So cheers to Chris.
When Chris jumped into our Discord maybe a month ago at this point, he messaged me a couple times. We messaged back and forth. He is very excited for us to cover Secret Project 4. We were talking about Secret Project 4, him and I, for a while. So there's a little teaser for you for when we get to cover that on the podcast. Thank you,
Thank you,
Chris.
Chris.
Yeah. Unfortunately, we'll have to wait a little bit for Secret Project 4, but I can't wait either to read that. So
I feel like Stormlight 5 will be looming over our heads as we're reading Secret Project 4. So
I know it's going to be daunting.
let's roll intro, and then we'll get a chapter summary from Eliot. When you're ready, Eliot.
Okie doke. Chapter 17 through 24, which is a whole bunch of chapters, but a lot of them were really short.
Yeah.
Some of them even like 2 or 3 pages in my copy. But it starts out with Captain Demu getting sick by the mist, but recovering, and Ellen still trying to figure out how to navigate the mists with his army and figure out what they need to do. Sazed goes and visits some of the terrace people who are apparently living next to the pits of Hathsin. And this is skipping ahead a little bit, but one of the later chapters, Sazed is kind of arguing with some of the terrace. They're trying to get him to become their leader, and he's adamant that he doesn't want to become the leader. We do get a couple of perspectives with Spook again, with a rather shocking reveal potentially that I really want to talk to you about. Spook hears a voice, which we're used to people hearing voices at this point, but the
Mm-hmm.
voice turns out to be Kelsier.
Yeah.
What the heck is going on there? Let's see. More with Tensoon. We keep dropping in on him. He's got a friend, Milan. I'm assuming is how you would say that.
Mm-hmm.
Milan is his friend. Tensoon is kind of trying to decide whether he wants to escape, whether he should escape, whether he's accomplishing what he's intending to be accomplishing here. And yeah, we get a spook flashback towards the end of this, which we'll definitely talk about here in a second. And I think that covers everything.
Besides the 11th Metal, the novella, like one chapter in length, 11th Metal, which we read but we never actually covered on the podcast. Have we ever gotten a flashback?
Not that I can remember. Does Kelsier do any with like Mare? He just talks about it, right?
Yeah, I don't think we've ever seen Mare talk on page. I think that Spook in The Hero of Ages might be our first flashback chapter in Mistborn, which is kind of strange to think about.
I feel like we've had minor moments, but not a flashback chapter, you know? Like, I feel like we've had moments of Ven thinking back about, like, Reen, her brother, or things like that, but not like a full flashback. I think you're right.
And you could maybe count the logbook, because the logbook is in first person and there's dialogue in it. So you could maybe count that as like a flashback, but I think like Stormlight style interlude flashback, like this is our first one. Let's talk about Elend and Vin first though, because there is a fascinating fact that they come to the conclusion here. I had no memory of this reading this chapter, so when I got to here, I was interested on what is going on here. Eliot, Vin makes the conclusion that no matter how many or who you send out into the mists together, exactly 16% of them will get the mist sickness. Now, how many like recover from the mist sickness is variance. Like there isn't an exact percentage. Some will die, some will not, and that doesn't have an exact science to it. But exactly 16% of whoever you send out into the mists will get mist sickness. What do you think of that?
I like math, so and statistics, so I was keyed in on that for sure. I wasn't sure if I had enough information to really draw any mind-shattering revelations from that. The mist kills exactly 16%. I think what I do with that information is conclude that it's it's an intentional act of something.
Okay.
And the obvious something would be Ruin, right? Ruin's out at large. Ruin is doing ruinous things. Killing 16% seems like a rather Ruin thing to do. And I think just leads me to conclude that, and I think one of the epigraph actually talks about this a little bit. I think it leads me to conclude that Ruin is methodical. Ruin is not random. Ruin is the intentional increase of decay, not necessarily like a chaotic destruction, but more the dismantling of something in a methodical way. And why 16%? No clue. But apparently that's what Ruin has decided, that I am going to strike down 16% of people who walk into my mist.
I think it's really interesting that the death number is not consistent, but the sickness number is exact. And it's not like there's a preset 16% of people of the entire population of Scadrial will get it. No, it's 16% of the people that you send out and that you record. Which begs the question, could you not just send people out in pairs and no one would ever get sick?
Ah,
Because you can't 16% two people? That's what I would
Great
do.
question.
Well,
Great
you could
question.
only have like 2 at a time, like ever in the whole mist, right? Because I assume this isn't just like per one little area.
It's however
Who
many that
knows?
I don't know. Like it's very strange that because it's
Or if you
exact,
sent like,
I feel like you could get
yeah,
around
it
this.
gets a little messy.
Yeah,
That's an interesting point. I didn't think of it. I was thinking of it almost. I mean, I knew this wasn't the case. I knew it wasn't this extreme, but I think of it as, it's not like a 16% population reduction.
right.
It's like 16% of your big group that's out in the mist won't come back. It's weird. It's odd. And I don't have, there's like no reasoning to why that number.
Just a potential theory I could come up with of at least why 16 don't die would be potentially this is Ruin. Ruin has decided for whatever reason that 16% is the amount of people it wants to attack. And so Ruin affects 16%, but then preservation comes into the equation.
Okay.
Preservation acts against Ruin and works to save those people that have been attacked, works to preserve those people that have been attacked by Ruin, but is only successful at most of them and not all. And preservation is not quite as methodical, maybe, as Ruin. So Ruin attacks exactly 16. Preservation saves most of them, but is a little more randomly spread out statistically.
Interesting. Okay. Are there any more repercussions we can get from this? Can you could you reliably kill 16% of the Inquisitors or something like that?
I mean, if we're talking about this as Ruin, then it killing Inquisitors seems unlikely, but
Right.
Koloss? Does it affect Koloss? I don't know.
And speaking of who it doesn't affect, jumping down a couple chapters, it doesn't affect Terracemen or people from Terrace.
Yeah, odd.
What's up with that?
And if you ask that question in the context of like everything we just said there, that definitely throws a wrench into what's going on here. What's so different about the terrace? Why would if this is Ruin, if this is an intentional act of Ruin, which I guess is still an assumption at this point, why not the terrace?
And the only way the only thing that I can come up with is maybe the Lord Ruler gave them an immunity on his Ascension
Oh,
Day, but the Lord Ruler also tried to exterminate them all with their
That's what I was
ferochemy.
thinking. Yeah.
So that is kind of counterproductive. I don't know what that means. So, but that's the only thing that I can think of that the Terrace people would have an advantage over is the Lord Ruler was Terrace. So maybe the Lord Ruler hard coded them against the mist or something. I don't know.
and correct me here. Not all terracemen are ferochemists,
Correct.
just some,
Correct.
or
But
one, I
but you
guess, that
can
we know of.
but you can breed ferochemy like you can breed allomancy.
Right.
Um, and so it's pretty much all in the Terrace people, and they've been preserving it through that, or tried to.
So maybe there's something that has to do with the bloodline of barochemical powers also gives you some kind of immunity to the mist.
Sure.
Maybe.
What can we do with this information?
Wait and read and
Beats
find
me.
out.
No, we're supposed to theorize, Paul.
I mean, there's like 16 as a number we see. I don't know if we want to dive into that, but you see the number 16 around.
Uh-huh. We know that
Is that
we're trying to get to 16 metals on our allomantic table, right? Because there's a pie chart
That's true.
of fours and we're missing one. So I don't know if that has anything to do with it.
I mean, obviously 16 is a liked number on this world.
Right. And there's a bigger implication, Cosmere 16, which I don't think we should get into. But,
Yeah, that's what I was thinking of.
right. When Sazed visits the pits of Hatsin, and finds out that the Terracemen aren't affected by the 16% mist sickness, he's also again tried to be convinced to be their ruler or their king or their leader, their chieftain. And Sazed again declines them and says, "You guys don't need a monarch right now. Like you guys have been through enough. Just sit here and live with your council of elders." And they disagree with him. The council of elders disagree with him and say, "No, we need one of our own people to rule us." And he says, "Well, the Lord Ruler was Terrace, so let's not go down that path again." What is there anything more to conjure from that conversation? Did you get anything out of that, Elliot?
Not not a lot. it seems to be continuing Sazed's development that he's on. Of he's still he's still a little checked out at this point. He's still reeling from the challenges he's faced in his faith, in his relationship with Tyndwyl. He's not really in the right mindset to be taking on the leadership of an entire people, and yet the rest of the terrace are, I think, just pretty desperate to have someone lead them because they've always had that, and so they they want somebody. Sazed's kind of the only candidate. Sazed's not really at the right place to do it. Yeah, make of that what you will.
Yeah, Sazed's in a very interesting spot where he feels despondent, I think is the word he uses. Of
Yeah.
he knows he should care about what's happening around him, but he can't pull himself to do the work that other people around him need him to do. So, should we talk about Spook?
I think so.
Half of our outline has Spook as the first word. So,
Before we do that, one quick note, actually, because I think we're going to talk about Spook for a little while. Epigraphs. There was one epigraph I wanted to mention. We're still getting more information out of the epigraphs, which is really nice. I'm sure we can spend time maybe dissecting those in a later episode as we maybe step through a few of those. So I won't get into all of them, but one of them particularly dropped an interesting line that caught my eye. This is the epigraph from chapter 22.
okay.
It talks about the Lord Ruler's power, his seemingly abnormally large amount of allomancy, allomantic power, and it specifically compares it to Elend. But then it says, let's see. I'll just take it completely out of context. The original 9 allomancers. It makes a reference to he had this power that was the same as every one of the original 9 allomancers. That has me scratching my head. And maybe realizing that we haven't been told as much about the origin of allomancy as I thought.
Mm,
I, for some reason, and maybe I was jumping to conclusions, thought that the Lord Ruler was the first allomancy. That was the beginning of allomancy.
right.
Was Lord Ruler takes on the power of preservation, maybe ingests one of those beads that Ellen did, and becomes Mistborn Allomancer, and then it just passes through his bloodline from that point on.
Right.
This statement seems to contradict that. The original 9 Allomancers. Wait a second, there were 9 of them? Who were the
Which,
rest?
which
Who
would
are the other?
which would imply that there were 10 of those beads
Ah,
at the Well of
yes.
Ascension, and they grabbed 9 of them.
Yep. I thought of that too. 9 taken and 1 missing.
Right.
That's a classic story right there.
Is that a Stormlight spoiler that we're talking about here?
I wasn't going to say any other words.
That's it. I mean, it's not. It's prelude. So go read the prelude to the
that's
Stormlight
true.
Archive.
Go read the first couple pages. And
Yeah.
you'll find that.
Maybe not so much a spoiler as maybe like a nod or a reference.
I mean, yeah, the Way of Kings did come out that very next year, so it would have been written by then.
So
Anyway.
another thing to add to that fire that Eliot is building, and I will call it a fire because I don't know what to do with it. It's just kind of taking over my mind, and that's about all I have to say of like the history of that. That we don't know anything else about that, and I certainly wish we did. Another thing is, we've gotten multiple mentions that the quote Allomancers of old were super strong.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
they in comparison to Allomancy right now, Allomancers used to be way more powerful. They talked about how it didn't take a derailment push on emotions to take control of a Koloss or a Khandra. Any Allomancer that could use that could just take control. Like it was easy. You didn't have to use derailment. You didn't have to have this huge push. You just had to use your emotional allomancy, which is kind of a crazy perspective because we see duralumin is just reaching another level that you can't actually like reach otherwise in a short burst. So I wonder what duralumin would have done back then.
It makes me wonder if the allomantic ability dilutes over time as it gets passed from one generation to the next. It's if you're an allomancer like Elend, who became one because you ingested a nugget of pure allomancy, whatever that exactly is, you get it in its purest form. But then, like every generation that it passes through your bloodline, maybe your descendants have a little bit less, a little bit less, and a little bit less, perhaps.
Maybe that's why duralumin was invented or
Maybe.
coded in. Maybe I don't know.
It makes me wonder though, like Vin is described in the beginning as a more powerful than you think she would be Mistborn,
Hmm.
which makes me scratch my head a little bit. Like, why did she get a more powerful strain than others? Although I think it's talked about in some of these chapters here that Elend has more like raw power than Vin does.
A lot more,
Mm-hmm.
Vin just knows how to use it better.
right? That I think it's stated that Elend has more power, but Vin is way more subtle. Like she can craft her art way better than Elend can because she's just been doing it for longer. All right, let's talk about Spook. And I had a epiphany at the end of last episode, which the more I think about it, the more I'm convinced I'm correct. And I will never beat the I'm spoiling the story allegations once again, because I genuinely don't remember if this is true or not, what we talked about at the end of last episode. But it did just come to me as a original thought, I think, that Spook may or may not have been hemalurged at the end of
Spiked.
last episode. This episode, are we just hallucinating the whole thing, or is is Kelsier actually here?
Well, that was my exact question the first and second time that I read it. This second, no, I actually don't know. It feels about the same to me. Uh, that is an excellent question, Trevor. I would say that he is there, at least in some capacity, like in spirit or something, because he gives direct instructions that Spook, I don't think, would have intuitively known.
Right.
Maybe he could have known it in the, unconscious memory of his brain, but like knowing where the metal vial is, stuff like that, makes me think Kelsier's actually here somehow.
Well, here's my hesitation though. Something seems to be here.
Okay.
Hmm.
Calling itself
And
Okay.
Kelsier?
or calling it, well, Spook seems to recognize it as Kelsier. I don't know that it claims to be Kelsier. I would go more down the path of Spook is hallucinating and or going through withdrawals because he doesn't have his tin that he's become so reliant on that
Mm,
he's seeing Kelsier when it's not actually.
okay. I I would push back on that though. Whatever's talking to him tells Spook I named you. I do believe that's claiming to be Kelsier, right? Doesn't he say
Okay.
I gave you Spook as a name or something like that? And um and, I mean Spook is far from a reliable narrator, but he he recognizes Kelsier's voice before he recognizes Kelsier's image. So
Right.
that yeah, there's an interesting argument to be made for both of those.
I'm hesitant mainly just because of Spook's rather delirious state, but
Right.
all that said, I'm actually inclined to go down the path of this is Kelsier. It does seem at least partially convincing as long as Spook is not seeing and hearing what he wants to see and hear.
Sure. And something deliberately wakes him up. He's unconscious at the beginning of the chapter, and he's awoken by Ghost Kelsier. So this would also lead credence to why Kelsier is way more prevalent in the series when he dies in book 1, which is what you were surprised at, Eliot, several months ago. That you were so confused on why Kelsier was such a fan favorite leading character, and then he dies at the end of book 1. Like, we have 6 more Mistborn books to read. Where's Kelsier? So
I also immediately drew parallels to our mist figure
mm,
from last book.
okay.
We multiple times, we still can't even decide what to name it. The figure that appears in the mist that Vin interacts with a lot. Luke, no, Elend interacts with it
Yes.
on a couple of occasions. Not sure that Spook does. Just the way it's described as like a shadowy figure, outlined by the light behind it, or whatever it is that is kind of described as, immediately made me think of our mist figure. And so, if this is Kelsier, has it been Kelsier all along? Has it been him taking action in the form of some kind of mist being? No idea how that happens.
Yeah.
But those are the questions coming to my mind.
But this one, going back to the end of last book, we began to question, well, how many of these mist ghosts are
Yes.
around? Because we
Oh,
did
yeah.
we did a quick head count of, well, hold on, if it's following some basic rules, there appears to be at least 2, right? Because it's in 2 places at once. And then this one is specifically inside a house. This one in
Yep.
this chapter. And we know that the mists and the original mist spirit from last book doesn't go inside of buildings. But then at the end of last book, there was one at the Well of Ascension. Does the
Right.
Well of Ascension have special rules? Plausibly, sure. But this one is in house random A, and there appears to be a mist spirit Kelsier in the house with Spook. Directly talking to him, too. I think that's the first time we've seen that.
Directly talking to him doesn't seem to be able to maybe interact physically with the objects around because it has to like guide Spook verbally
Hmm.
through everything Spook needs to do to escape. But then grants Spook the ability to burn pewter.
Yeah. And talking about what we talked about last week, now I'm beginning to wonder, are we manipulating Spook here? Is the spirit taking credit for something that he didn't actually do? Did Spook get pewter from last episode,
Oh,
and now the spirit is taking credit, giving him pewter? Did he already have it at that point? That's what
I
I'm
see.
wondering.
Interesting.
So I'm putting something together right now, which may be dumb. This may be something that we've already known, and y'all were like, "Oh, of course, I already knew that." So Spook sees the metal reserve for pewter, like he has the pewter, and then he can see that there's a new metal reserve. It's not tin, it's pewter,
Right.
and he burns it. That is how Inquisitors do it, right? They have hemalurgy, which is the spikes, but they still burn ingested metal. Is that right? Because
They
I know
talk
there's
about
this whole
that.
thing of the Inquisitors having atium, so I'm assuming that they have the
Yes.
physical bead of atium, which they have swallowed
Uh-huh.
and then burn. And
they
that
talk
kind of
about
just struck me.
And they talk about that at the beginning of this book because Ellen and Vin kill an Inquisitor, and then they talk about needing to like cut open its stomach to see what metals it has in there.
And yes, and the Inquisitors previously didn't have atium, but now they did, implying that they found some and are now burning it. Or you could maybe argue that they're now spiked with it, and that's how they're using it.
Yeah, because I had honestly had the assumption like I didn't think much about it. So just like passively I had the feeling that they can use all these metal powers because they're hemalurged with that kind of spike. Not that they're. So it's like. So if the hemalurgy is like you're embedded with a pewter spike, you can now burn pewter like an Allomancer.
Right.
Then yeah, it could be like Spook was impaled and then now can burn pewter. That makes sense because we've never seen an Allomancer just do 2. It's either
Right.
0, 1, or all of them.
Right.
And which is kind of bad news, I think, for a Spook friend. Because I read this and I was like, wow, he's a one of a kind, gifted by Kelsier himself. But I'm starting to
What
think
if
that this is much more manipulative.
Right.
I'm
Maybe
starting to think that hemalurgy has less to do. Well, it obviously is going to have something to do, but maybe less to do with the type of metal of the spike itself,
Mhm.
and more to do with the blood involved. That there's a hint to that in one of the epigraphs of like I think you read it, Trevor, last episode. Hemalurgy is related to the blood, and I go after this because again, Ellen and Vin take down an Inquisitor. The Inquisitor only has so many spikes in him. He doesn't have all the metals. He
Right.
doesn't have ATM. They're looking
it's
specifically
true.
for what he does have. They list out what he has, and I forget exactly what all is in the list, but it's only like 4 different types that he's got in his body. So I think that and like we just talked about, he's got metals in his stomach that he's burning in traditional allomancy as we know it. I then look at what just happened to Spook, going with this crazy idea that you've come up with, Trevor. He gets stabbed with a sword. I'm less curious about what metal that sword was, and more thinking about the blood of the person that was stabbed through. It was a pewter arm.
Right.
It was a pewter misting whose blood was spilt in the stabbing of Spook.
Right.
Could that then have directly led to this pewter ability?
Right. Which would then lead back to, okay, why is then Ghost Kelsier taking credit for
Right.
giving him pewter? Did he guide the sword, or is he just spewing random stuff and saying you should listen to me because I just gave you pewter? Would that also imply
Yeah.
that Spook still has the sword in his chest?
And and those are the questions I'm very stuck with on. I still don't understand exactly how hemalurgy works.
Right.
Does the spike have to stay in the person to maintain the ability? Is it a one-time thing? Why do Inquisitors still have spikes if they don't have to have them in? Yeah, I don't
Because they
understand.
look cool.
I was,
I
I was gonna say my understanding is you have to have the spike for it to be in effect, right? Like we've never seen anyone exhibit anything hemalurgically without having it in them. Maybe Spook will be the first, Um, but this is so interesting because it's like, okay, so our options are, okay, option 1 is Spook was stabbed, normal sword, inherited 0 powers from said sword. He's bleeding out, he's gonna die. Kelsier miraculously appears and grants him the ability bestows him the ability to burn pewter.
Right.
Given our entire conversation, I feel like that's the least logical. That doesn't logically make sense because it's like if he could just give that power, why doesn't he do it to some other people? Show up and give them some extra, You can now burn copper, that would be pretty helpful. Option 2 is Kelsier did give Spook the ability to burn pewter, but it wasn't him just having the power to give that, but him is guiding the blade
Right.
to hemalurgically give Spook that power, and then claiming that he did it. Option 3 is Spook was hemalurgically given this power to burn pewter, and Kelsier is intentionally trying to take credit for it for some reason. And all these options seem a bit fishy,
Right.
I feel like the middle one is the one I would probably roll with the most. Of maybe Kelsier, that was part of his plan or whatever. He knew that would happen, and so at the end of the day, yeah, Spook gets stabbed, which is really tough, really painful. But now he can burn pewter, and that's very valuable. And he's going to survive because he can burn pewter, and he's going to get to have that with him, But the other side's like one is a little bit fantastical of he can just give the power at will, which is would be really crazy, and the other one being very weirdly manipulative thing. So kind of interesting. I'm curious to see how that shapes out. Because also for the record, I feel like I'm a little bit in Trevor's boat. I remember some stuff, but like this, I'm like, man, I don't know what happens.
I
What's
don't
coming
remember
next?
what the answer is. Yeah.
There's another fishy element of this too that is making me question things because here's the line that alleged Kelsier says. I didn't give you pewter just so you could live, Spook, Kelsier said, pointing. I gave it to you so you could get revenge.
Ooh,
Now
yes.
go.
Good line.
I can't decide whether that sounds Kelsier-ish or not.
It sounds Kelsier-ish, but
Yeah,
I'm not sure. Yes, I agree with you. It's a little suspect. It might be a little
like
too Kelsier.
almost, yeah. Like revenge in a way is kind of what Kelsier is all about. Is I'm going to take down all the noblemen. Gosh darn it! If you're even related to nobles, I'm killing you on the spot. But revenge was never like really the direct motive for Kelsier, if I'm remembering back to book one correctly. It was part of the conversation, but
Sure.
I gave it to you so you could go get revenge. Now go. I don't know. I don't know.
I think we get a Marsh point of view of Kelsier's main motivation was revenge, and I think Marsh thinks to himself he didn't even snap and become a Mistborn until Mare died, and then he just wanted to get revenge, and that's why he snapped. But I'm not sure if that's true because we've had the question posed to us, I think in this book, by someone in the crew talking to Vin, questioning. Oh, it's Ellen talking to Vin. Why did Kelsier not snap before the pits? What happened at the pits?
Yeah.
Why the pits specifically did he snap? Because if you remember at the time, he was angry at Mayor for betraying him, quote unquote. So that somebody, I think it's Ellen, is almost suspicious of either the pits or Kelsier, that something else happened at the pits that we don't know that made him become Mistborn. Taking this a different direction based on last book, if Spook still has either a little bit of a sword or just hasn't noticed a huge sword protruding out of his chest, one of the two, is that the reason why he's here in Kelsier?
I mean, people with spikes in them apparently tend to hear things.
Back to the Zane conversation from last book, because that was the big reveal right before Zane died, was he had a spike, which we could go back and talk about what power that gave him. But what why is Spook suddenly hearing voices if not for metal in his chest?
And our examples of people who've been spiked that hear voices are primarily Zane and Marsh.
Right.
And presumably both of them are hearing ruin.
Okay.
So then
Are we going down the path of Ruin is pretending to be Kelsier?
I don't know if I'm willing to like state that outright, but like that's where that line of thinking takes you.
Right. I don't know the answer. Which is why I feel free to say everything I'm saying because I don't remember the answer. So if I'm spoiling the whole book, I apologize. But I genuinely
You
don't
just say,
remember.
"Whoops, I forgot."
Oopsies.
Um, I feel you opened up a can of worms, and I don't know if I have anything for it.
I'm wondering if I'll be curious to watch and see if Spook retains this power of
Yeah.
pewter. I'm almost wondering if the stabbing of Spook was hemalurgy, but maybe like the spike didn't stay in him, and so maybe like you need the spike to continue to have whatever power you gained from it, and maybe he's going to get like a temporary pewter ability due to maybe the blood of that dude that's still on him or in his system or something like that, but then maybe it goes away at some point and for somehow you need that spike to make it permanent. Maybe something like that.
Maybe I'll. There's nothing in the scene that would imply he still has metal in him, right?
I don't recall anything.
I don't. I don't think he does, or at least it wasn't told to us yet.
But yeah, a lot of questions.
Anything else on Spook before we talk about Tensoon?
Well, we got to do his flashback, right?
Oh yeah. Speaking of hallucinating, um, while he's unconscious on the floor, we get a whole flashback chapter where Club saves him from his paternal father and mother. Sad scene.
This was sad, and we get I don't remember the name, but there's a lot of stuff that we kind of knew about Spook that comes into the picture here. I for what was his name? Lestabornes? Was that what? Lestabornes. That's his like actual name, right? Which we
No,
learn.
that's the
Oh,
name he gives Clubs. That's not his actual name. That's the name he gives Clubs in this chapter, which means what at the end of the chapter?
it's like left by parents or something like that.
I've
Left at
been
birth.
abandoned. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like left at birth. Yeah. So that's okay. So I got that mixed up a little bit, but it's very sad. But what we see that he is at clubs is like that's too hard. You're called Spook. Yeah. Um,
Yeah.
I think I have to say about this whole Spook flashback scenario. My brain right now says why Spook? Why is Spook the one that we're focusing on?
Yeah.
Why is Spook the one getting these flashbacks? But reading it and like my additional thought is this is so I'm instantly so invested. I'm so engaged. I'm so curious. Not for anything like, oh, is this gonna have some major Cosmere implications? It's gonna have some major story implication of, is hidden in Spook's past? Is it the answer to all the questions we have? I'm not worried about that. I am just engaged in his character, which I think is really cool and really what I feel like I should be doing as I'm reading through this part. I shouldn't be looking at his tragic backstory and being like, "Oh, where's the Easter egg to ruin in the past?" or something like that. Which I will say, Brayden Sanderson, you've ruined me to where I often think that ways now. That line of thinking, even in the midst of an emotional story, but not too much. And I just want to say, I think this is a really beautiful part. But I'm curious to know what y'all think of like, is it right that it's Spook kind of in this role in this scenario? This is just we are in part two now,
Mhm.
right? Yeah, but this is just part two of the book, so it's not like Spook is our point of view character for the book or anything like that. It's just a bit of development and a bit of progression on with his character. But I'm curious to know what do y'all think about it as a whole? Spook being in this spot.
I like it. I was not expecting it by any means. I wasn't expecting more Spook pages, but I'm enjoying what we're getting. I think I think he's interesting, and the Orto is an interesting city to explore. So
I was confused by it, that's for sure, at first. So I didn't get a 15 years ago tagline at the beginning of the chapter. So I was spent the full half of the chapter trying to figure out, is this a hallucination? Is this a dream? Is this real? Are we actually in a flashback? So I'm very curious about Spook. It does make me feel like if we're getting this kind of time dedicated to Spook's character, maybe he's going to become more important than perhaps we thought.
Yeah.
We've he has really come into the bigger picture of main characters we're spending some time on. What kind of role is he going to have to play in this narrative here?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, before we talked about all this last week, you threw out the prediction that he was going to be an Inquisitor, and then uh, we talked a little bit more that might give that more credence. But before all that, you predicted that he'd be an Inquisitor. So
And I'm holding to that more on like the like thematic lines as opposed to the strictly magical ones. It seems like that's an arc I could see his character going on.
did you predict Marsh being an Inquisitor too?
I don't recall that. I mean, that was part of the intentional plan, right? Marsh was gonna go do that.
Well, he was gonna. Yeah, I mean, kind of. He was going to be a part of the Ministry, but I don't know if they
Yeah.
really intended for him to be an Inquisitor. Oops. Anything else before Tensoon? All right. I don't know if I have too much on Tensoon besides the fact that he's been talking with Milan the last couple chapters, and Milan is trying to convince him to not give up or to not accept his fate. I don't know if Tensoon is really viewing it as giving up. He's more saying this is what I deserve, so I'm going to accept it and face it. But Milan is accusing him of you're taking the easy way out. You need to if you truly believe what you told the court, if you really believe the world is ending, it is your duty to fight. You need to get out of this cell, do everything you can to fight back against the second generation, get back in the world and help us. Like if that's what you really believe. At the end of chapter 24, I think, is when he finally gets the second generation give him his dog bones back, his wolf bones, as like a punishment of you have to wear this for the trial. And the last sentence is they've given me the means of escape or something like that.
Ensoon is a schemer. He thinks a couple moves ahead. I would not want to play chess against Tensoon. First of all, I'm terrible at chess, so most people beat me. But Tensoon would crush me because he's thinking ahead. He planned that, or at least attempted to make that the case where he wanted them to think that the dog bones were humiliating for him, so that they would force him to get them back. But he's got a plan. Maybe it just gives him enough speed that he can run away really fast once he's a dog. I don't know. I'm curious what exactly he's going to do in dog form, but
Yeah,
he's clever.
I don't know either. I assumed that would be the case as well, that he can outperform all the true rock bodies that the other Conjure have. I don't know.
They keep talking about all these different blessings, like
Yeah.
the blessing of potency and the blessing of presence and the blessing of there's like at least two others. And they haven't quite explained what those are yet that I saw.
I don't have. I don't remember anything about them, so I can't tell you anything.
Yeah, I don't know if there's anything we know about this other than this is some kind of Conjure special thing, and then we just I don't know. It's kind of a read and find out, I would guess.
Feels like
I
it.
don't. Yeah, I wish I had something to go off of there. I don't remember exactly, and so I don't know that there's anything. I will say. Actually, never mind. Okay, my thought was I'll explain what I was going to say and then why it's not actually relevant. I've had this feeling that there's just a lot of odd powers. I'm gonna try to not get too Cosmere zoomed out, but there's shards and then there's like the magic system, right? There's ruin and preservation, and then there's like allomancy and stuff like that. And there's also the hero of ages. And I still don't fully understand it. I think I understand it now. Like where does the hero of my thought had been for a little while, where does the hero of ages fit in? Is the hero of ages, is that just the name of whoever's holding the shard? It's like in story, according to the Ska, it's just like the hero of ages. It's a legend, right? They're not putting strict rules and a power level to it. Us, the reader, with more context of the greater picture, are assigning that like level of power, right? So for a long time, I thought of the hero of ages as like, is it really like, is the hero of ages just a name for our protagonist Ven who saves the Ska from the Lord Ruler, or is the hero of ages the carrier of a shard? Like where are we? And some of the stuff with our like the Conjure here and like blessings, we've heard the deepness, stuff like that. There's a lot of things that aren't. I don't know what level to put them at, if that makes sense. And so that's my only thing is, I don't know how serious of a thing we're talking about whenever we're talking about these blessings or different things like that. So that was a very big explanation for something not actually relevant or helpful, but that's where my mind is regarding it. So you're welcome.
I will say, no, I won't. That one I do remember, so I can't say.
You tease.
Yep. All right. We do have something to talk about for Stormlight stuff. So, full podcast spoilers for what we've covered. Kelsier is back. Maybe? Kind of.
Apparently.
but he is it somebody impersonating Kelsier? But anyway, this is a missing puzzle piece that Eliot's had. Well, he's had the puzzle piece. He hasn't had the entire puzzle around it. So you know that Spirit something spiked eye Kelsier shows up as the Lord of Scars at the beginning of Stormlight 5. So that with that information, which you're certainly not supposed to have that information reading this chapter, that does lean more towards this is Kelsier and he's back as a cognitive shadow somehow.
I mean, yes. The fact that we've seen the Lord of Scars elsewhere at a presumably later date
Confirmed later.
does yeah, okay, confirm later date does maybe lend me to believe a little more readily that this could be Kelsier for sure in
Right.
the flesh. Still have a lot of hesitations, even with
Right.
everything we talked about in this episode is 100% real. I absolutely still have a lot of hesitations for all the reasons we just said. I'll I'll share some thoughts that you guys probably can't react to, so you can just give me blank stares and just let me talk for a second. And if there's dead space after that, will make sense. Is I'm starting to wonder more and more, was that reveal of Kelsey, the Lord of Scars, in the prologue of book 5 like an absolute mind-blowing jaw drops to the floor, people run around the room screaming like little girls moment for full Cosmere fans? Like, was that the moment where this epic character of Kelsier, who comes back in Mistborn, then comes back again later on with spikes through his eyes? Like, I'm starting to maybe get a glimpse at the implications of what we saw that meant very little, almost nothing to me at the time. That I could now see maybe this growing into like a did people fall off their chairs in shock when they read that in that reveal?
Paul, do you want to
Uh,
have any input on this before I talk all for a long time?
I would say go ahead and take the reins.
Okay. So to answer your question, Elliot, yes and no. 2 parts to this. Was it a big reveal that Thydakar was the Lord of Scars, the leader of the Ghostbloods? Yes. Was it a
Okay.
big reveal that Kelsier was involved somehow, or Kelsier could be involved somehow? No.
Okay. Interesting.
Does that answer your question?
Kind of. I'll put the pieces together for myself as we read, right?
Right.
It's a Rafa. We'll go and I'll get to the end of Mistborn Era 1, or heck, maybe end of Mistborn Era 2, and then understand exactly what that meant for Cosmere fans. But
Right.
I'm just trying to figure out, like, was that a Sanderson dropped a nuclear bomb on everyone with that, or was that kind of a you could have anticipated it? It was just like you're cheering because there's your character you wanted to show up kind of moment. So I'm just trying to understand the right amount of shock I was supposed to have in that moment that carried no shock for me at the time.
Yes. You are correct that you missed out on a big shock, that Kelsier appears to be the leader of the Ghostbloods. That is a big reveal. That's a huge reveal that we got at the end of Rhythm of War. Didn't mean a thing to you. And I had to spell it out for
Right.
Paul too. um, but the fact that he is running around Shadesmar somewhere, no, that's not a big reveal.
Got it.
All right. Let's do a Stormlight refresher before we end the episode, gentlemen. This goes to Eliot first, who's leading 2-0. Paul, this is a big week for you. Either you pull it back and you're within 1, or you're down 3-0, which is like a big gap. So
That is true. I would like to say, for the record, I am 0-2, which I understand, and that's totally fine. But all of these are really, it's not. It's a landslide in matches won, but not in points scored.
It's been like 1 point each
True,
time.
It's
So it's been real close.
1 point each time, and so really it just takes another 1 point the other way. And stuff we'll see. But I understand trivia is not my forte, but we'll see what happens. So I'm excited. I'm here for having fun. Even though I'm an extremely competitive person, but I'm not winning, so I'm here to have fun.
yes,
I'm
of
just
course.
looking forward for the day we can actually get one of his "What is this chapter name about?" question, because I have
those
a
are the
feeling we're not
hardest.
going to
Yeah.
get any of those.
You ready for one, Elliot? Because I got one for you.
Sure.
The first question is a chapter name. You have to provide me at least a little bit of context of what happened in the chapter. Crimson to Break.
I remember that name. Say it again.
Crimson to Break.
Shoot.
If you don't get this, this will be one of the ones where you're going to be very disappointed and go, I knew that.
I can think of a couple directions to go with this, but I want to say this is the incredibly terrifying Dalinar murders millions of people. It's like not millions, but
That's a lot of people.
at I
Millions. Holy smokes.
It's like at the rift, he goes like chasing after somebody and then ends up like brutally murdering a bunch of people that he shouldn't. There's like we talked about, there's like a redacted version of the chapter that the publisher was like, hey, you can't do that. You got to tone that down.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember exactly like who or why he was chasing. It's not the we're full spoilers here, right?
Yes, this is under
It,
Stormlight spoiler.
it's not the he kills Evie scene. It's it's like before that. It's like
The,
just before that, and he
the rock slide
slices up a bunch
scene
of people.
where he gets caught
Yes,
in a rock slide and then he takes this anger out on all the guards around him.
exactly.
Incorrect.
Bummer.
Paul, here's your shot.
Okay, I have my guess, and like I was actually very confident for the record with my guess last week on monsters. I definitely thought that was the Shalon flashback, so that makes me doubt any guess that I will have off the top of my head. My initial guess, which I'm sure is wrong, but my initial guess was actually the scene where Adolin and oh gosh, not Venli, Eshonai, where Eshonai becomes fused, I believe it is. Eshonai becomes fused, and it's like the scene where her, and Adolin are like talking, like kind of like they've arranged to meet, and originally it would have been a really good meeting for us, but then she like became fused and was no longer. It was no longer a good meeting for us.
She keeps her shard plate on, so you can't see that she's
yes.
a little different. Yeah, incorrect.
Yes, that's okay. I figured it was wrong, but that's what came to my mind.
I had high hopes for you when you started with the word Adolin, though.
Ugh,
This
dang it.
scene,
I should have just said Adolin and left it there.
this
That
scene
wouldn't count.
is the chapter before Elokar's death. This scene is the scene of them assaulting the palace of Kholinar, and High Marshal Azure, who is Vivenna, is leading the charge, and she uses all of her color swear words, and she says those gates are going to be crimson to break, or it's going to be hell in there, is what she's saying. That's the title of the
Man.
Got it.
Nope. Yeah, I would not have gotten there
but
in a couple guesses,
the intention.
As Paul was talking,
go ahead.
I was thinking maybe like a Vasher kind of thing. It seems like almost like a Vasher thing to say, but yep, wrong.
The intention of these is to refresh your memories on Stormlight. So
okay.
You now have a couple scenes fresh in your memories of Stormlight. Over to you, Paul, for your quote ID. Has your Spren expressed any reservations about the work you've given her? Damnation, you're as bad as a Colin scribe, always poking. We need to be cautious. We can't be certain what your Spren will do. As her self-awareness grows, she will surely dislike working against the other orders.
So I just have to say who said this, right?
Who is talking? And there's actually two people talking in this, and I will accept either one.
You're going to hate me, but can you read it one more time?
Yes. Has your Spren expressed any reservations about the work you've given her? Damnation, you're as bad as a Colin scribe, always poking. We need to be cautious. We can't be certain what your Spren will do as her self-awareness grows. She will surely dislike working against the other orders.
I think this is Taravangian talking to his Dustbringer Surgebinder. And I can't remember the name of the Dustbringer Surgebinder off the top of my head, but that's my guess.
Malata, and you are correct.
Malata, yes.
Well done.
Let's go. Okay, I thank you for rereading it. I hate to pester, but it really sunk in, the second time. So,
Eliot, would you have gotten that?
Nope, that was a way better answer than I was going to come up with.
All right. Time for everyone's favorite segment. Over to you, Eliot. Here's your review. You need to tell me what they rated it and what they're rating. I've been looking forward to this book for a long time. Sometimes anticipation is better than the thing anticipated. I struggled through the first few chapters and then set the book aside. Maybe I'll try it again another time. Those first few chapters were dull, drowning in names, and written in slapdash impressionist style, where words are thrown around like splatters of paint in the hopes that a masterpiece emerges from the canvas. I usually like Sanderson's writings. The last book of his that I read was Steelheart, which I enjoyed thoroughly. This one, however, I did not finish.
Would help if I knew when Steelheart was published.
that's what I was thinking. Yeah. That's a wild card for me.
Names, they don't like. This is a 2 out of 5. Is a rating. They're clearly frustrated. but seem to like Sanderson, so probably not going to completely throw him under the bus. The book. Oh, I'm struggling with the book. This is gonna go Rhythm of War, but it doesn't quite feel right. That just seems like the one more likely to have waited a long time for him. Rhythm of War, 2 out of 5.
Well,
Okay, can I ask a question that I assume I know this is an understood thing. This is the book we've read, right? Or
You
could
have
this
read it.
be anything? Okay.
you have read it, and it is heavily weighted to Stormlight. I'm not excluding other things, but 9 times out of 10, I'll give you a Stormlight book.
Okay. I think this is a 1 out of 10. I think they tore it apart enough and didn't finish it. So I think it's a 1 out of 10.
Okay.
But man, I've been wrestling with what book it is. Man. So my thought is they've been waiting for it for a long time. So instinctively, I'm going to talk through this since Eliot has already said his predictions. So hearing that makes me think, okay, it's a later book that they've been waiting for it to come out. Been excited for it to come out. But if it's all like worried about names, like, oh, too many names now, I feel like you can't be in the book 2, 3, or 4 and be like, oh, now it's too many names. Like it kind of starts off like that pretty quick, you know? So I think this, I don't want to say the Way of Kings, but I kind of want to say the Way of Kings. Okay. I think it's either the first or second book of Stormlight. You're right. If I knew when Steelheart was written, I feel like that would really help me a lot here. I am going to go ahead and say that it's the Way of Kings. I think they were really excited for the new Sanderson book and got a little overwhelmed, which honestly is kind of fair. 1 out of 5, the Way of Kings.
And Eliot, you said 2 out of 5 Rhythm of War?
Rhythm of War. Yep.
Okay. This was a 1 out of 5 for Words of Radiance. They apparently got through the Way of Kings, but set down Words of Radiance. I don't know how that
Interesting.
happens.
Okay,
But
I will. Can I say one thing?
Yeah, go ahead.
The only thing that I thought about with Words of Radiance was at the start. There's all these, like the crew that Shallan ends up with after the shipwreck.
Yeah, that's true.
I could kind of give a little credit. I feel like that was a bit of a lot of names with not a lot of payoff. I could kind of get behind it, but man, if they finished that book, they would have been hooked. Man, that's
They
when
probably
it
didn't
really
even get
hooked
to
me.
the shipwreck, which is in like chapter 5 or something like
Uh-huh.
that. Because
Yeah.
Yeah, I
like
mean
when
the
that
drama,
happens, you
like
got to know.
Yasna dies, and then oh man, it's pretty. Anyways, that was the only thing I could think of it not
And
being.
and
And
one of the first
you read through the Way of Kings, and
Well,
then couldn't
right.
make it through the start of Words
And-
of Radiance.
and
Goodness.
one of the first chapters in Words of Radiance, you're like sitting down with Bridge 4 decompressing after book 1, so maybe that's boring for them. But I don't know.
But my thought is you're familiar with the names,
Right.
so that's why with the Way of Kings. Anyways, all right, that's kind of funny.
All right.
But
Paul is leading 2-0 going into the last question, so that means he has won this week, but we'll go with question 5 anyway.
I think this is my first trivia win ever in
Over-
any element we've ever had on the 3.5 years that we've done this podcast. So I'm feeling very good right now.
Over to you, Paul.
You're headed for a sweep. Let's see if I can save my dignity
Yeah.
with a single point.
Nice shutout for you. Clean
Yeah.
sheet, as they say in football terms. Here's your trivia. What is Kaladin's third ideal?
Who's going first?
Paul is going first.
It's okay. I think it's the. No, wait. Is that Taft's ideal, or are they the same? Okay. Okay. I wish this wasn't tripping me up as much as it is. I think the third ideal, right?
Kaladin's
ideal.
third ideal.
It was I will protect those I hate. I'm getting it mixed up with Tefts. I'm about to get it mixed up with Tefts.
I do the same thing. That's why I put this in here, because I miss this one.
Okay, I'm gonna say Tefts
Okay.
so that I can get it out of my head.
Okay.
I think Tefts is like I will protect those I hate, even if the one I hate the most is myself.
Bingo.
I think
Great idea.
that
I
is-
love that one.
That is Teft, but that's not Kaladin.
Kaladin doesn't have to say that. What does Kaladin have to say?
Oh, dang it. How did I remember Teft's and not Kaladin's? It's like I will protect. Oh my god, I'm probably just wrong. It's like I will protect those I hate. I don't think I know the full thing. I don't think I can remember the full one. It's like something along those lines. I will protect others, even those that I hate.
Eliot?
No answer. Yeah.
I'm gonna go different. I might be going too far. I'm trying to remember which numbers are which of the ideals. I think it's the next one, which I'm gonna butcher the wording on. I don't remember the exact phrasing of it.
Always
It's along
most
the
important
lines-
one, always the next one.
I
Get it? Not funny.
yes, yes. I'm gonna go. It's the one where it's like I accept that there are some I cannot protect.
Okay.
And I don't remember exactly how that's phrased,
All right.
but that one.
I'm giving neither of you a point. Let's go through this. What's the first
think-
one?
Well,
Life-
is the first one the
life-
basic one?
life
Life before death, strength
Yeah,
before
Strength
weakness,
before weakness,
journey before destination. That's the first one. The second one, which he says when?
When he's protecting Alucard.
No, that's his third. The second one, which he says at the end of the Way of Kings,
I will protect those who cannot protect themselves.
I will protect those
That's
who cannot
right.
protect themselves. That is second ideal of the Windrunners. Third is where we get more personal. Paul, you are correct. I will protect even those I hate, even if the one I hate most is myself, is Teft's. Paladin's protecting Elokar, Paladin's third ideal. I will protect even those I hate, so long as it is right.
Okay.
So you were almost there, but you
Yep.
missed the...
Which is funny because I definitely thought that was when he said the second ideal. Like I remember that because that's when he gets Shardblade Sill.
Right.
But I just had in my mind that I knew that was the third ideal. Anyways, I was all sorts of mixed up.
And then
That's
Eliot,
fair.
you were correct that you went too far with I'll protect, or I accept that
I
there
accept that
there are those that I
cannot.
cannot protect. That is him
the
accepting the
fourth.
death of Teft and Tien at the end of Rhythm.
But he was supposed to say it when Adolin was dying,
Correct.
right?
And he
And
couldn't
he doesn't say it.
Yeah.
Because he can't say it.
because he refuses to
He-
accept that Adolin will die. So he's not
Yeah.
ready for his fourth ideal. Yep.
Right.
Yeah, I missed that. Wow.
All right. 2-1 towards Eliot, but Paul, that was a pivotal week for you that you pulled one back, and you're not
You're right.
in the swamps.
I did
So-
well under pressure, so it's just a one point game now. You know.
We will reconvene next week. Thanks for joining me, Paul and Eliot.
Farewell.
Absolutely.